Warm greetings, everyone. Welcome to another session of Friday Waters Thesis Club. The Friday Waters series is an extension of the flagship program of W4W, which is Wednesdays for Water. The idea of Friday Waters is to wet the Fridays with fun-filled and yet fruitful activities for the future generation. Friday Water series has water talkies, book reading, thesis club, water arts, and meet a maestro. Some of them take place every month, depending on the speaker's availability. The focus of Friday Waters Thesis Club is on bringing the students and scholars who have done or are doing their research on some aspects of water to the session in order to bring to the people the various aspects they touch upon, the identified problem, their aim and objectives, methodology, research, design, the fieldwork they have conducted, findings and learning, and even if they are doing at a very early stage of conceptualizing the research. In the process, we get to know about the making of the research and the contribution it aims to do in the science and the society. The session is also meant to increase the outreach of the research and the researcher. My name is Mansee Bal Bhargava, and I'm the host for today from W4W. And I'm joined by Professor Sonia Gupta from Boxen University, Hyderabad, as a discussant for today's session. For today's session, we welcome Anup Kumar Saha to share the related topic of his PhD research on Ganga to Teesta, the state of bilateral ties between India and Bangladesh. Welcome, Anup, and really happy that you are going to talk about something so close to my heart, being a Bengali and also brought up in Bengal. And also, I think our discussion today is also very much Bong. So somehow this has become a Bong club today. So may I now invite Sonia to take up the session further with Anup and set the rules of the game.
Thanks, Mansee, and a very, very good afternoon. Welcome, Anup, to this session of Friday Thesis Club. Yes, we are all very, very interested in this topic of yours. But first, let me give a quick introduction. Anup Kumar Saha is presently a doctoral candidate at the Department of International Relations, South Asian University, New Delhi, India. His doctoral research looks at culture in the riverine borderland. He is broadly interested in water security, governance, and diplomacy, with a specific focus on the Ganga-Brahmaputra-Meghna basin. He was awarded the SAARC Silver Jubilee Scholarship by the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, to support his doctoral degree. Anup is also associated with some of the projects run by IHE Delft, the British Academy, and IUCN. Some of his writings have been recently published in the Journal of South Asian Studies, the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, the South Asia Monitor, and the KRF Center for Bangladesh and Global Affairs. Anup, you have already shared your presentation with us, and I can see it's very concise, very brief, but I know that you will have a lot to say. And as Mansee said, we are looking forward to understanding this very delicate bilateral ties and how that influences what we do on this part of the world. Yes, it's over to you. You will have about 20 to 25 minutes for your presentation, and then you will go in for some interaction regarding what we have just seen and heard. It's over to you, Anup.
First of all, I'm very happy to be here today, and thanks for your warm presentation, also introduction on me, and let me present my slide. So I think it's visible, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the Ganga and the Teesta river. As you know that Ganga and Teesta is both are transboundary river flowing between India and Bangladesh. And I am looking at the state of bilateral ties. That means the present status between India and Bangladesh and its possible implication for its future renewal and the possible implications on the treaty between India and Bangladesh. So before going into deep, I just wanted to give a certain overview why I'm discussing on this topic is for the two reasons. One reason is obviously the growing the climate change, which is very emerging in South Asia, not even South Asia, beyond South Asia, I mean into all over the world. And another is the whole basin security that we are talking about, the Ganga, Brahmaputra and Meghna basin. So this is the two reasons that I am going to talk about the Ganga and Teesta, and obviously in reflection with the state between, I mean the river shared between India and Bangladesh. So uh, as you know that the Ganga is originated in Gangotri Glacier in Himalaya and is also flowing from China, Nepal, India, and Bangladesh, finally in Bay of Bengal. And at the same time, the Teesta is also originated in Sikkim, and it's a tributary of Brahmaputra, and it also flowing through uh, northeast, and finally it enters to Bangladesh. So why? And obviously the Ganga and Teesta, the both rivers, both are transboundary in nature, and obviously both countries has the sovereign claim. That's why this whole debate between the water sharing between India and Bangladesh gets debated and obviously contested. So before going into deep, again I am trying to give a certain overview of the geography of the basin and its implication when we are talking about the Ganga and Teesta, which is very crucial to transboundary river between India and Bangladesh. And if you look at the geography of the basin, India is in the upper riparian country and Bangladesh is a lower riparian country. And after after 1947, when the partition happened, gradually both the countries get their sovereign status, and after the sovereignty they are also utilizing the sovereignty claim, and this is how the whole discourse surrounding the Ganga and the Tista, and obviously is the upstream and downstream complex gets debated, and and the whole discourse of the controlling or management of the resource gets very complicated. And this is how the feelings of insecurity coming in, which is triggered by misgivings, hesitation and mutual suspicions. Why so? Because when the country is shared by between two when a river is shared between two countries, and then these feelings of insecurity coming in, where when the state actually trying to intervene the natural resources to their own interest, or to their to privilege their internal sovereignty, I must say. And then the whole water becomes in a security discourses. Why I'm saying so? If you look at the water security perspectives, the whole water security perspective, it actually navigated through or studied through traditional or critical understanding. Why I'm saying so? In traditional understanding, when we are seeing that state becomes a sole actor or very predominant in realist understanding. And again the critical water security coming in when it actually looks at beyond state or very traditional understanding, where community or individual perspective gets advantaged or gets privileged. And the whole water security, if you look at the whole the perspectives, it coming from 1947 post-war diplomacy when its linkages, or then coming in the 1990s when the security discourse gets turned into a critical understanding, where human security becomes sole actor to understand whole the uh, security studies discipline. So in international relation, water gets a very elaborate treatment in security studies if you look at from our perspective. And if, for example, if you look at the water in South Asia, it is actually it is actually understood in a very realist understanding, where state and also traditional understanding gets privilege that I already mentioned. And if we look at the very new institutional perspective, it actually looks at how states actually making the institutional framework to actually navigate or to control the whole water resources. For example, we can say the dam building institution, or you can say the Joint River Commission, or you can say there are some water treaty between India and Bangladesh. One of the thing I want to highlight is this institutional framework that is also new institutional understanding. It also gets debated when climate change, the whole discourse are coming in. This is how the whole water security as a state or the institution gets debated. And when we come as a critical water security, when we come as a critical water security, water has been understood as a emancipation. How it gets understood as emancipation? That is actually the three possible factors are there. One is inclusion, communication, and cosmopolitan understanding. When it actually moves from traditional understanding, which is called state as a sole navigator actor, from community perspective, individuals, they are giving the agency of the individuals, where whole the discipline has been broadened to understand a very holistic understanding. So having said that, when it comes to water security, what we understood it in a sense that debate has been understood through the supply and demand side. Why I'm saying so? Because supply side becomes very, very important when one needs to navigate the water. Why I am thinking this way? Because supply side is a prime actor to actually control or to actually manage the whole transboundary river, because supply is the backbone of a river. So that's why the whole states, when it comes to a transboundary river, state tries to control the supply side without looking the demand side. And the whole thing, the supply side and the demand side, this is how the water security has been understood to some extent in international relation disciplines. And then when it comes to water and food security, water is not actually the water is actually also the also very crucial and very essential for the food security of the communities living on the riverbanks, at the same time which actually transcends to the whole national development. Because the the supply, the efficient amount of supply is also very helpful, or also very in a way how communities agriculture is dependent on, which is actually they're connected to their food security. After that, when you talk about the water and sustainable development, that is also how actually the United Nations, the SDGs goal actually connected to water, how we actually looked at water, and it actually the holistic understanding how water has been understood in really societal ties, economic ties, and at the same time cultural ties. And finally, when we look at the water as economic security, it is actually also predominant or very dominant understanding that through the dam building activities or in the treaty. But when we comes to the communities perspective, those are living on the riverine banks, then we can think that how it actually for their livelihood per se, those are the fishermen, those are the boatmen, those are there, they're also dependent on the water, but which are also overlooked in a broader discourses. So this is the whole the whole water security as a framework, or as a theoretical framework, or the concept that has been understood in the whole in international relation discipline, particularly in the security studies. And the geographies becomes very, very important when you talk about the upstream and the downstream complex, because upstream, that is a very, very taken for granted that upstream is actually control the whole water supply without looking at the downstream, without a downstream complex. This is not the ultimate. That should not be the ultimate scenario. Uh, you know. That should not be an ultimate scenario of managing or controlling the river board, or controlling the river basin, because upstream influence also impacts the downstream, or the downstream the supply, or the downstream supply side also become very important for the upstream to all the life of the basin. So, and the next, what I am doing that, I am pitching on my discussion based on the three question, not just one question and the two sub question. So what I am thinking that in what ways can the state of bilateral relation help in understanding the future of water cooperation between India and Bangladesh? So basically what I am looking at, what's the current start of bilateral relation between India and Bangladesh? That is very, very important. And how can the past and the present inform the understanding of future water cooperation? Why I actually frame this question? What's the key factors behind this framing this question that I have? Like, one is the how rivers has been understood from various discipline, or you must say the policymakers or the state. Rivers rivers certainly certainly understood as a very resource centric understanding, not as a living entity. That is how the state actually navigates on it. One of the second reason is how actually water can be a possible parameter to navigate national development. And obviously the third thing is the whole basin security. And obviously given the geoecology, because due to the climate vulnerability of the region, and obviously there is a one very sensitive thing is the Bangladeshi domestic regime change. So that is also should be kept in mind. And a lot of possible factors behind of framing those questions. One another more factor can be the resettlement and the displacement due to the water shortage in the river and banks for the community. Because in the dissettlement, there is a huge migration happening in India's territory, which also can be India's national security concern, which also can impact on the bilateral relation between India and Bangladesh, and also the way of living of the communities, and finally the sustainable development of the whole basin, which also include a state, institution, and the community. So before going into the main discussion, this is the three questions that I am pitching to understand the whole discourse. And obviously, what I am discussing today is based on my own research and my own contribution on the field. It's not that, I mean, it's very tough to explain that I can explain everything within this short spin of minute. In the next slide, before going into the many very specific discussion, I am wanted to give a very glimpse of the water in South Asia. I mean, if we are talking about Ganga and Teesta, I think one needs to understand the whole discourse of South Asia, how South Asia's water looks like. So, like what is South Asia as a region is actually a colonial construct. What Ashish Nandi mentioned that South Asia has lost its ultimate self-image. From that vantage point, I can say water in South Asia is very contested. Why I'm saying so? It's also very traditional understanding gets privileged when a state intervenes without looking at the downstream or upstream. One, the second thing that I wanted to mention is there are the mechanisms behind in South Asia's water. It actually a colonial understanding, which is a very reductionist approach, where the navigating or the building dams becomes a center point of discussion in water in South Asia. So this is how water becomes a security issue. And given the five factors that I found very interesting to talk how water becomes a very security issue and why it's very contested, because one of the reasons behind that is scarcity. Why I'm saying so? Because in scarcity, if you look that in the dry season, the upstream actually controls the whole water supply, and which is actually impacts for the downstream. For example, if you look at the Bangladesh and India, how India actually behaves in the dry season with Bangladesh, and it also impacts on the whole basin security and the population growth. The second thing is the population growth in scarcity, because the huge population growth in South Asia, it actually tough to to fill up the supply and demand for the every communities or the peoples from the both countries. And another thing is the rapid urbanization and the development of the region, which is one can say is not sustainable, and one can say is for the national economic growth. The second thing is the geopolitical tensions. Why I'm saying so, the geopolitical tensions, because if you look at the Farakka Dam that I am coming later, if you look the Farakka Dam, there is a lot of debates between India and Bangladesh, because how the Farakka Dam can work. There in Bangladesh also opposed it, and India also try to build the dam to control their to 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 control their water for fulfilling their internal sovereignty. And obviously the second thing is, if you look at the Tista River, then the China's attempt, it is also a very geopolitical concern for India as well. And the second thing, the transboundary river dispute. If you look at the Ganga Water Treaty in 1996, it was a disputed, still it is a disputed despite having some challenges. And obviously Tista is solely a disputed, and it's also under negotiation. And fourth thing is the climate change, because if you look at in South Asia, the glacier melt and the increasing temperature, which is also actually impacts the whole region, particularly on the river basin security, and also unpredicted monsoon. That is also very important to think about while talking about water in South Asia. At the same time, the seawater rise is also impacting the whole discourse in water in South Asia. And the internal governance challenges, the last one, that you can see that there are very difference in their ideological stance in domestic or in international. Because if you look at the Teesta River, that there are domestic concerns are there. That's why the negotiation gets delayed. And obviously in Bangladesh also, the recent political shift, it also can be a big challenges for navigating or for bringing a successful negotiation between both countries. Another thing, the Joint River Commission has also weakness and also strength uh, between them. Okay, and obviously when we talk about the water in South Asia, when I wrote this short commentary, how I look at river as networks towards the Kulu River South Asia, what I actually discussed in a bit earlier time, that water in South Asia has been understood in very one word reality when a state gets very dominant. But when you think that universal understanding, when there are multi worlds are there, we should not look at water from the state perspective, but we should look at from their culture of the communities between, because it's a shared culture between India and Bangladesh. Why not culture becomes a very key focus to understand water, to give up to give a to give a justice for the river, or to understand the different words are there, to get a very relational understanding. And another thing is, that's why I bringing a argument on that, how river has multitude aptitudes to create a network against the politically motivated state-based demarcation through the border. Because most of the rivers also a river border. You can't say that it's how a river actually made a border between states. So this is how actually we should look at water in South Asia, not from a one world reality, but from multi-world reality. And after that, how we can think that, like, when security becomes a sole actor to understand water, but security also issues pose challenges for the community. How challenges for the community? Because when you talk about the Ganga Water Treaty, it starting from, in sometimes we can say 1947, or we can say 1951, but we can say 1975. But those whole years of the negotiation, the whole years of maybe 27 years, this whole years of negotiation, that the interim time, in this interim time, what's the status of the community who are living on the river bank? They are not giving, the state here overlooks by giving their security. So this is also and can be an alternative challenges to the South Asian riverine community, when the state, for this the soul of a state, for the sake of a state, they are actually trying to get delayed for the negotiation. For the time being, or the interim time, the community actually suffering. The communities are the living on the riverbank, they are also suffering. So this is one thing that I wanted to mention here. And the specific argument that I actually wanted to bring here is that when it comes to the question of human survival while maintaining the ecological balance, transboundary river water has come into the conversation on how water means for human survival. But negotiations over South Asia water resource get stymied by opposing national interest, undermining human survival. So this is the whole the negotiation period between India and Bangladesh in the Ganges basin when it comes to this specific case. If you look at 1957, the whole negotiation process has been started when India actually decided to build the Farakka barrage. But in that time, there was nothing much concern there, because Bangladesh that time was not independent. And again, the 1971, India started constructing the barrage. And when it comes to the 1957, then the whole debate coming in, because in 1971, India, Bangladesh got a sovereign status. And this in 75, the barrage has been, the operation of the barrage has been begun. And in 1977, then there are a lot of attempts has been made between India and Bangladesh for the negotiation. And there is a concession has been reached that, okay, we can sign the first Ganga water sharing agreement. But still that's not sustained. and again in 1982, after several years, there is a more signing ceremony happened between India and Bangladesh, and then you can see in 1985, and finally in 1996, the signing of the Ganga Water Treaty, and they mentioned that it's a 30-year Ganga's water deal. That means this treaty is not even a sustainable treaty, and also it is very sensitive, given that this treaty is not a fixed treaty. So what I can understood from the India Bangladesh, the Ganga water treaty is very fragmented in nature. There is no permanent or sustainable consensus has been made between the countries. But obviously, we can say that this is a very good steps to sharing the river between India and Bangladesh, because something has been made in those years. So from that vantage point, we can say there are strengths and the limitations are there. One, the strength that I am going to talk about, that the long-term stability, the 30-year water deal, and there has been water sharing mechanisms, that how we can actually share the river and how we can manage or controls the whole rules and the principles are there. And then there is also a very good the outcome of the diplomatic and regional stability, because the whole discourses of the water between India and Bangladesh has been in any way was stuck through some of the years, but again they reached a consensus. That means we can say that okay, there are diplomatic and regional stability. And obviously the one very important thing that I can mention is the joint monitoring. Both countries are monitored jointly, which is a very important uh, appraisal, or I must say very outcome of this treaty. And obviously there are some flexible dispute resolution. And if you look at the limitation, then I can say there is no ecological consideration in there. And also I must say the South Asia is geoecologically very vulnerable. And obviously I mentioned already the treaty expired in 2002 without clear renewal mechanisms. That is also important to think about it. And the no guarantee of water availability. So there are also, this is the very strong limitations of this treaty, and also lack of binding dispute resolution mechanism there is. And that way I can say that there are some of the institutional and legal perspectives are missing in this treaty, that we need to consider in the possible renewal after 2020 year. I mean 1 year after 1 year. Now is to 2025. So and so after that, the past that I have just described, and we can see the present state of bilateral ties. And my question is there any possible renewal? Because when I think of the possible renewal, I contributed a very short my research why India and Bangladesh should renew the Ganga's water treaty. And I here pointed out that how I actually conceptualize water security that I shared earlier. And the whole argument that I bringing in, that how Bangladesh and India need to review it for both its own basin water security and the development of both nations. And obviously the second article that I also contributed, where the argument I brought out that the renewal of the Ganga's water treaty is much more dependent on the bilateral relations between the two countries. So this is the whole contribution I have. Based on that, I found some of the key factors are there in between them, which is one is the riparian hierarchy, because supply sides is becomes very important when you talk about the upstream and the downstream. Upstream can influence, or upstream can make some hegemonic attitude to control the water, which is also can consider the riparian hierarchy that can't be overlooked. And the second is the water democracy. In South Asia, water democracy is very much missing, because India is Bangladesh both not actually ratified in 1997 UN Convention of Law and Sea. And obviously the major third point is the trust, because in Southeast not India and Bangladesh, in South Asia there is a very low ground of trust between states. And trust becomes very important when we talk about the negotiations or the water shared between states. And the fourth reason is anti-India sentiment that is happening in that is obviously there in water discourses between India and Bangladesh, because there are anti-India sentiments fueled by some ideological differences between the domestic parties. So here, one of the main theme that I want to bring is the hydro relationship over the renewal of the Ganga's water treaty between India and Bangladesh may have become static in the light of the recent political upheaval in Bangladesh and India's stand on water. that can be resulted in temporization, which an impact on the lives of the riverine communities. And the second case that I wanted to bring in, I just wanted to give a very overview that there are multiple attempts has been made for successful negotiation on Teesta River between India and Bangladesh. For Bangladesh, it is very important because 40% of the total cropped area of Bangladesh and provides direct livelihood opportunities to the approximately 73% of the population. And for India is also very important because Teesta, as you know, is a lifeline of North Bengal, and almost half a dozen of districts of West Bengal are dependent on the waters of the Teesta. And if you look at the Teesta River, it actually, the whole negotiation begins, and the whole negotiation is to some extent stuck. Even 2011, an interim deal that was supposed to last for 15 years, but in the West Bengal domestic politics, led by certain political leaders, they just stopped the deal because of their regional or the domestic ideological differences. So if you look at the Teesta River, it actually called the two nations and one river, because West Bengal opposition's fluctuating water flow, and which was also geopolitical sensitivities, and obviously this treaty has a lack of legally binding agreement. But one of the very important aspects of the Teesta deal is that what I am going to try to talk about this, China's attempt. So there are whole public discourse in Bangladesh. We can say that there is a huge um, um, uh, huge there are public discourses are there in Bangladesh to how China actually attempted to build a dam in Bangladeshi side to control the water resources without taking into account the India's concern. But when you look at the water security in Bangladesh, but I found that in my own research that and I made argument that China Bangladesh Teesta project is not likely to be a decisive factor in Bangladeshi water security, because how China actually proposed on their written agreement that it actually not is actually overlooking the supply side, and it actually not the whole the China is actually overlooking the geoecological perspective on there, how actually the riverine species are there. There are a lot of the mismatch between the written agreement and and the practical solution. So I found in my based on my research that China's situation not becoming a very likely very decisive factor in Bangladesh water security when you talk about the water in a very critical perspective. So so after that, what we can think that the way forward, how can we think that how both of the treaty can become a successful treaty and can be a very footprints for South Asia's broader regional engagement and stability. So one thing that I have in mind is the basin-wide cooperation, and the basin-wide cooperation can be lead through the three possible factors. What I am saying that desecuritizing of water, cooperative security approach, and depoliticizing of water. So I am saying the basin-wide approach because uh, India actually very comfortable with their bilateral approach. But in bilateral approach, India is actually trying to make their own treaty or make their own engagement in their bilateral way. What their foreign policy actually approves this way. But when we need to move beyond from their bilateral approach, and we think about the basin-wide cooperation, so that the whole water or the whole rivers in South Asia can get their own security, coming beyond the state and the one world reality. So for that, I think one of the first step to understand the whole basin-wide cooperation through desecuritizing of water, how we can move from a state to the community per se. And also the cooperative security approaches here should be understood very win-win relations, or not even the zero-sum interest, how both countries can cooperate and to identify some of the common challenges to work it out. And obviously the depoliticizing water, because like when we talk about the data sharing, which is very important, that data sharing has been also been politicized, and that the media narratives, how it actually spreaded their news through the to the national or the domestic spheres, that is also very challenge to understand or to navigate the whole water discourse in South Asia. And obviously the one of the very backdrop to understand to build a basin-wide cooperation or the framework. So one of the thing, the last thing that I wanted to point out, that for the basin-wide cooperation, I think there should be very legally bounded rules, regulations with very rigorous institutional framework where irrespective of state, community, and all the multi-stakeholders collaboration and engagement should be there to build a basin-wide cooperation to navigate or control a sustainable South Asia. So this is that. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Anup, for this wonderful presentation. I must congratulate you for such a wonderful presentation and highly disciplined, scientific, and it was such a delight to see a scholar presenting his work with all scientific publication. I think this is the first time we are having in last 3.5 years when a scholar presents the entire work through his scientific publication. So I'm in deep gratitude to you for making this very, very professional presentation, I must say. It's, way too good for Friday Waters, because here we are looking more at people who are in the building up stage. Having said that, I'm sure Sonia also has some questions, as so do I. So as a discussant of the session, may I invite Sonia to start the conversation with Anup. And meanwhile, I request all the participants who are here to please put up their questions and comments in the chat box, and we will take them after Sonia has some questions put in. And if there are some matching comments, I think Sonia can take them up also. Invite you as well. Over to you, Sonia.
Sure. Thank you, Mansee, once again. And yes, Anup, your presentation, I was amazed at how you were so fast, and yet every word was clear, relevant, and driving home. So yes, I didn't even realize that the time has flown. It was just so well constructed. So I have some, very basic questions, in the sense that these probably are not the questions to be asked at a level that you have described your research, but I'm still a little interested in knowing this. We know this Joint River Commission has been there right from the TT, but as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, that the commission has members from India and Bangladesh.
True.
But would you think that there should be a neutral country as a member too? Much like when you have an arbitrator, because obviously
As you can see from Indus Water Treaty, right? I mean, how.
Yeah, World Bank is there as a third party and arbitrator as well. I mean, in fact, when it was signed, go ahead, Anup.
Yes,
I mean, it's a very important, and it's also all the policymakers, all the academics are also thinking like this. I mean, it's a very important question, crucial question, and I am not still expert on that, but what I am suggesting that I don't think so there should be a neutral party should be there, because this is all the deal of India and Bangladesh. They should negotiate between themselves through identify some of the common challenges due to the climate change, climate vulnerability in the region. So that's the thing that I have in mind, because if you look at the international organization or NGOs, they're also in sometimes politicized to privilege some interest. So what I am thinking that it should be looked at from India and Bangladesh, both sides. Yeah, I mean.
Right. Yes. So looking at the condition of bilateral ties in the past, let's say a year or so, since there has been a political upheaval in Bangladesh, I was thinking that then maybe there is a bias in the discussion. But of course, you have done deep research, so your recommendations are definitely going to be much more practical. So you've been talking about climate change, and you've been talking about, therefore, melting of glaciers and seawater level rise. And let's say river water, the supply of water in the river, climate change plus upstream control has led definitely to a drop in the promised amounts of water that should be coming downstream. Has that happened on a regular basis? I mean, what I would like to understand is that both from human intervention, which is direct, like say a dam or a barrage, and then there is the indirect intervention, which is climate change. So does the water availability, both the quality and the quantity, has it gone down since whatever was promised in the treaty?
Yes, you are right, because there are also scholarly articles coming in, and it also makes a very big debate that from the Bangladeshi side, the scholars claim that in their research article that, okay, Bangladesh not getting their ultimate share, what is written in their 1996 deal. But the thing is, like, given the climate change, very speedy nature of the climate change in the region, so it's very tough to to control or to think the natural circumstances given the climate change. Because if you look at the river hydrology, I mean, not talking hydropolitics now, it's more of a science based understanding. The river hydrology is no humans has any hand on it. So it depends on the time, it depends on the spaces. So now it's very tough to say that does it make help or not. But yeah, I would suggest the both countries taking the whole, I mean, making a very engagement from the all the stakeholders, engagement and all. I think all should be keep in mind that, okay, how is the hydrology of the river basin, or when the temperature is high, or when is it not. But it's a very complex process. So I must say, haven't read much on it, but I would suggest, because diplomacy is a bit tough when it comes in a diplomatic table. When it's also bit tough when we are talking in a public forum or in a discussion. And so the water diplomacy or the hydro relationship between India and Bangladesh, it depends on how both states willingness to make a effective and efficient collaboration between both states. Because now I would rather suggest, or both countries should look at it through they should look at beyond their national interest, but because through the climate change. Because climate change is becomes very kind of very, I must say, harmful for the river basin itself, not even for the communities, but communities comes later. And which is ultimately actually affects the communities or the national development for the both states, which actually can harms the whole regional development. So yeah.
Thank you. And I think Yuvraj, as Bengalis would say, has a question which is quite related to what we're discussing right now. Should I read out the question,
Yeah,
Mansee?
sure.
Yeah, maybe Yuvraj, you can interact,
Yes,
because that
please.
makes also encourages the
I know that is
participants.
much better. That if you can,
Yeah,
you can
thank
switch your
you.
camera and
Yuvraj,
microphone
are
and
you around?
ask
Please
your.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Yuvraj.
So, hello, Anup. It was a very interesting session. I really enjoyed your session. I had one question regarding the Ganges Water Treaty. As it is, you know that it is set to expire. You have also mentioned that it is set to expire on 2026. So, how do you think it is how do you think about the way forward? Like, it is important for Indo-Bangladesh relation as well as for the whole BBN sub-region.
Yeah.
So, do you think an IWRM approach can be a way forward, or is situating IW approach in regions like South Asia, where sovereignty claims reigns high? Do you think it is effective? So, what
So
you?
Yuvraj, thanks for the question. And yeah, you are to some extent correct. And I mean, I really support your question, because if you look at the Mekong River Commission and how they have the commission, but if you look at the South Asia, there is no institutional framework like Mekong River Commission. So even in if you look at the Mekong River, if you compare like why South Asia doesn't have any river rain institution, why Southeast Asia has a Mekong River Commission, that we can think that, okay, there are ideological differences. But if you look at the IWRM, that I also may basin-wide approach, it's a kind of a is both are connected. So the only one major differences in South Asia, why IWRM is not actually is not is still helping to understand the institutional framework in South Asia as like MRC, because the ideological differences. Because if you look at the MRC, those all Southeast Asian countries, they have the same ideology, political ideology. But if you look at the South Asia, see that look at the India-Pakistan water relations, India-Bangladesh water relation, India-Nepal, there are a lot of differences. So I think for the IWRM, there is only one backdrop that is there. Also, this is ideological differences first, and the second that I am like assuming is like the geography of the basin, because the geography of the basins reflect, I mean, on regards on the river hydrology, it becomes very very important. So there is a mismatch between that. Okay, and yeah, we can think that IWM, obviously IWRM can be very helpful to understand the South Asia's basin-wide cooperation to give a institutional framework. So yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Ankit has also asked about policy, since we got around to talking about policies. He's asking that, Ankit, are you here? Would you
Yeah,
like to ask your question?
yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, Anup, that's very wonderful presentation. Thank you for all the inputs you have made here. So my question is that what, like all the existing policies, mainly in the South Asia, are governed by very much technical and technocratic approaches. For example, structural things, dam building, embankments, and other things. So yeah, people don't consider the post-humanist approach while implementing such policies. Like they are not keeping into consideration what about abiotic factors, non-humans. So my question is that what are the alternatives you will suggest? Taking climate change also undermine that is because of the climate change, the policies which are government very much technocratic approaches are relevant or their relevance is decreasing. So, what will you suggest as alternative or way forward for these technocratic approaches? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ankit, for very interesting question. See, Ankit, you are right. The technical in very deduction is that I mentioned the technical approaches are there in South Asia, but that doesn't mean that we are overlooking it or we are avoiding it. We should take also this technical in approach in between. But at the same time, we need to look at also at the like that human and non-human connections, like how we need to give a justice of the multi-species justice also, like how fishes and the dolphins are there. Because as of now, what I understand through the cooperation is, I know the fish to fish cooperation, they can travel from here there. Why the dams are there to stop them? As I know, the cooperation is the birds to birds cooperation. So yes, you are right. So what are the alternatives to, would you suggest as a way forward? Yeah, I mean, alternatives, it should be there, like it should be the political willingness, moving beyond from their own national interest. So if they can, I mean, it would be very tough. I mean, I must suggest, because I mean, based on my 2.5 of research, years of research, I think that I can't say that they are moving beyond from their national interest, but they have to, because given the climate change, because if they are not, then the whole river will be dead and it will actually impact whole the national development. So it is very high time through our I mean, I must say, I mean, as a young water researcher, so all the young water researcher or the youth perspective can need to suggest that, to try to need to understand that okay, we need to come beyond from their national interest and look at it from the climate change perspective to make a very sustainable river management or the sustainable South Asia. So yeah, alternatives, I think that is one way of alternatives. And the second way alternatives, we need a multicultural engagement. When you're talking about water in a capital city, Dhaka or Delhi, and we are not even taking consideration of the communities living in the riverbank, that becomes problematic, I must say. We need to talk about to talk about the water, while we need to bring in the communities or the policymakers or the NGO or those are who are active, even the young researchers on water or young activists should be there to in the diplomatic level. So yeah, that is I have in my mind, can share with you.
Right. So that's all the stakeholders
Yeah.
should be together sitting. Yes, absolutely. One sentence that you said caught my attention, and you said that the treaty is very fragmented. And I'm just thinking that if the treaty is fragmented and the relations are also kind of getting fragmented, then where do we go? What do we do? First of all, if the treaty is strengthened, um, just tell us a little bit about how you see it, how you perceive it as being fragmented.
Fragmented in the sense, if you look at the whole process of the diplomatic diplomatic sitting, like from 1975, then 1988, 1977, and then 1996. Even it's a 30-year deal, it's not a fixed. So it's a very bit of a sensitive. So that way I understood that's very fragmented. But still there is a sustainable stability has in the treaty. But and again you asked that the bilateral relations given the political situation, and also I would suggest there should be the temporization on the treaty. Treaties will be there. I mean, will be negotiated. I think maybe after 15 years or 20 years or 30 years should be, but the temporization, which actually takes time, that will affect whole the ecosystem of the river. At the same time, the community people living on the river bank, and that can temper all the South Asian, the whole South Asian riverine regional cooperation. So because you can say the people, see, I know that negotiation takes time, but it's a very 30-year deal. It's a very sensitive treaty. It's not a fixed treaty. If you look at the industry water treaty, it's a fixed treaty, but there have some multiple mechanisms. Okay, after 5 years they will hold a meeting. It's fine. But if you look at the Ganga's water, it's a very sensitive treaty, so you can't take that. Okay, so what? So if I ask the question to the state level ministry or negotiation, so what would be after? What would be the ultimate case after 2026? I think they will have not also case, not have any answer. So I have the same. So I am thinking that okay, we need to sit beyond it in national interest to think about the climate, through the climate, that how actually climate is like occupied or all resources or the life-giving entity. So that's why I'm thinking. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Anup. Mansee,
Yeah.
would you like to come in? Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for the wonderful conversation which was going on. I was looking and looking at the work again to really digest it more after you had spoke about it. And also the wonderful interaction which was going on. I was listening carefully. I want to draw your attention because a Friday Water thesis is more about the scholar's work. So there is something about the subject matter which we are discussing, and also the objectivity of the researcher. So one is the subject of the research, which you are very well describing and explaining, and you also have gone in depth to understand the treaty. My question is more on the objectivity of the research, which Anup as a researcher is taking up. One question is already asked by one of the participants on the subject of it, so I will focus only on the objectivity of the research. It is often my observation, because we have been having many thesis club sessions now, that the subject matter gets often blurred or probably overpowering to the objectivity of the research of the researcher. So I'm just curious to ask you, how do you plan to delineate your research objectives? Probably you had questions, but then maybe from now on, you may be selecting one of those theoretical frameworks to really go in depth and work towards it. I mean, I'm just giving a wild uh, points to you, like hydrodiplomacy is already an established framework. Cooperation itself is an established framework. And because you have spoken at length about the human rights, and you know that Universal Declaration of Human Rights also has a framework in which we can also embed the water matters. Just curious about it. Maybe the riparian share, maybe the transboundary river, or maybe, and it was also very well placed to you as a question, if you would like to see if IWRN can be. So these are all frameworks for a researcher to research a subject. I mean, see, there's a world out there and there are a lot of problems, there are a lot of good things happening. But as a researcher, one has to really go in depth in one part of it and unpack everything around it. So the way I understood from your presentation, it was very well presented from the humanitarian aspect of it. It was very well presented from the political ecology aspect of it, and economy as well, when you very well laid out the whole idea of sovereignty and how each nation state has the right to ensure water for their own state. And at the same time, you also mentioned in the last but one slide where the domestic politics also comes into picture. And I really like the way you presented the work of the democracy framework, which is extremely poor in South Asia. So I'm just giving these clue, and I want to pick your brain on where does Anup go from here, and takes up some of these frameworks, and builds his own conceptual framework, which becomes your contribution to the research. Because see, this is extremely important for you to build your own framework, and which will probably over time, you may become master of that framework. Over to you.
Yeah, it's a
We
very
had this discussion yesterday also, so
that
yeah.
is very nice. So yeah, I am actually looking at primarily from water security framework.
Okay.
So that is one of my very core interest area. So apart from that, I mean, it's a very generic question and it's very important. So I think as a young water researcher, I think water consciousness should be there, the term water consciousness. Because, you know, if you look at water and, you know, in every spheres, if you look at Bangladesh or India or in a very, in everyday life, how we can use the water. So there is no consensus on it, because we need to be very conscious about that, how we utilize the water. And because, you know, if you go to the riparian community, and they also don't know, even if you look at the very center
We
point.
don't educate about water. So how will people know? Even well
I mean,
educated.
I'm telling, so
Yes.
yeah, that should be a very, that can be a very epistemic movement. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
yeah, that should be understood also from the epistemic movement, because movement in the sense very normative is non-violent, how feelings actually works for water. So yeah, so I am thinking that the water conservation should be, I mean, it's not that one-to-one people that we can do. So there are a lot of ecological activism in there. We need to promote this ecological activism through water, because a lot of NGOs are working there in the riparian banks. I mean, think there is river banks. We should also understand that there should be a water consciousness from their side to build the, I mean, eco activism or the water activism in I must say in South Asia through water consciousness, through water epistemic, or through this epistemic movement. So this is this thing I have in mind. But yeah,
Very good. So why don't you develop your own framework? And I mean, I can also tell you within the doctrine of human rights from the United Nations, the water consciousness is already, I mean, of course, also in UN water it is there, but how to really get into the emotions of people to talk about water probably can be a very decent and a deep contribution from Anup in this research. See, the presentation you made was highly scientific, highly thorough, but I was still looking for your contribution. So I'm getting excited already if you talk about that you are going to work on the, let's say, the conscience of, I mean, science and technology is going to take its own time and work, but can your research or PhD can really eventually contribute to this, which is very interesting. Because I mean, I'm at this moment developing a framework of water anxiety. So, I mean, and I'm
yeah, I
already
mean,
discussing
water,
with
yeah,
Action
yeah.
Aid to take up a case on one of the, river basin, and look at how salinity ingress and the climate fluctuation is bringing more anxiety among the people. But as you rightly said, if people are unaware that they have to conserve, and mind you, it's not only the people who live in the riparian community, educated or not educated, I mean, it is not so important. But if people like us who are also educated are not conscious about water conservation, we go to the boardroom, make policies, and next year there will be a lot of negotiations on the Teesta. I hope it is more flexible and dynamic. It has more room for change every few years with the change of climate as it goes next year. Because I mean, there is a nervousness on both sides that how this treaty is going to look at next year. Because I was there with what river conference in Bangladesh, and I've been following for last 3 years, and I see that this discussion is very, very hot in the country, and I'm sure it is equally hot at this side of the country. But what I learned from my Indus Water Treaty study is the beauty of both the treaties, for that matter, Ganga, Teesta, and Indus Water, is that even if we are looking at the gaps in the treaties, even if we look at the conflicts between the two countries, what needs to be appreciated And I want to quote one of our very revered professor on water cooperation who works on peace and ecology, Hans Gunther from Germany. We just had a book 2 years ago, and where he is talking about, yes, there will be constant state of conflict or disagreements in the treaties, but what we need to say the silver lining, if we want to go further, because the treaties are going to be revised, we have to look at the cooperation. What are the characteristics of cooperation? So I mean, I'm just giving you some clue. If you can highlight what are the characteristics that is keeping both the countries going. Why are we still on the treaty? Why we are still holding on the treaty? Probably we can find more components, I will say more philosophical arguments, more components for a research to see how this treaty can be leveraged when we sit next year to revise and probably make it for renewable every 5 years for next 50 years. I mean, I'm just giving a wild guess. Maybe these kind of things will come when we look at the good points of why this treaty could stand 30 years. I mean, this was heavily discussed in Indus Water as well, because it is considered one of the most respected treaty in the world, given the geopolitical situation between the two countries. The treaty still stands. So, and probably it is also contested that it is that treaty which even keeps both the countries together, despite all the differences. So I'm just trying to understand from you, if you can highlight some of the points which is keeping us together, keeping the two countries together in terms of treaty. Apart from the water share, of course, and of course, lot of, it's like you and me, neighbor, we don't like each other, we still have to live together. It's in a very simple.
I think that is. I mean, this is how my PhD work's also going on. I am looking at very cultural the ties between two states through the riverine community. How songs, how the oral narratives are there to think about water can be understood despite having dissimilarities, despite having challenges. So I think that is the one way, and how we can understand the narratives of the diplomatic relations, or the diplomatic ties, or one can say how the relation should be through water. So that is the one way of thinking, and which is also, I mean, you mentioned that affecting aspects of hydropolitics, like anxiety, fear, emotion, trust. So those are all there. So I think, so the main backdrop of those kind of cultural narratives, or all the affective aspects are there, is one is the self and other relations, how we understand through self through others, so how others can be a very important point of departure to understand self. So this is the one. And the second thing is the theory and the practices of security, because when you talk about the security I mean, for example, water security, but what is in theory and what is in practice, that is a mismatch is there. So we need to bridge the gap. So for the bridge the gap, it's not a one day matter, it takes time. And one day I hope that all will be sorted, and we'll get together through our joint understanding, through our culture, through our social ties, through our language, obviously.
I mean, I must say this word here with such a wonderful lines from a young water scholar, and I already see an emerging water scholar and a leader in the field of transboundary water. I hope you continue doing this work, and I also hope that the whole idea of consciousness can be really put into a theoretical framework, right from an individual to how it can be an institutional framework, where an individual walks into making a policy, making a treaty, is more conscious about the humanitarian grounds and also conscious about the climate change that is impacting. And can nation states really think beyond their administrative and political economy and ecology and move to the humanitarian? So you have to really break your head more to think how to develop that as a theoretical framework. Because I want to end with a word of caution. If there are more PhD scholars here, and you are also PhD scholar, having teaching research method for many, many years now, please be very, very careful to not drown yourself into the subject matter, and finish your research in the given time, becoming very, very objective about what you want to really contribute to the science for that particular period. then you have rest of the life to keep dwelling on the subject matter from different angles and many angles you would like to. So that's a word of caution. And as a senior who has gone through PhD, I would like to, and probably I'm saying this for almost every PhD scholar who is coming here. Sonia, you know that I'm always talking about this because then you can enjoy the process of doing a PhD and a research and finish it on time. That's extremely important. You know, it's because many of the scholars are in scholarship, they have to end at certain time, you have to start your livelihood. So this is more a logistical advice, but also an advice where your contribution can be noticed. Because the subject matter, the more you talk about, there is not much contribution which is considered as your contribution. It's a recycle of the literature. No, so this is something as an advice. With these lines, I would like to call it off for the day. And with this, this month and probably a few more weeks of next month, we are in retrospective mode at W4W as we have completed over 325 sessions. We want to sit back, relax, check what we have done, reflect upon, start writing more of our articles, which we intend to do, and also look at how we can make the Friday Waters, the Wednesdays for Water, and Monday Munching with Women for Water more effective, more outreachable, and also more interesting for as many as who are listening to us. If you are interested in water subject, if you have something to contribute in the water subject, do reach out to us and do also follow our work at www.w4w.in, and there you can find all the other details. All our sessions are open access knowledge. You cannot find any water education of this depth and width anywhere in this world at this moment. And I'm very proud for the entire W4W team that we could manage to bring all this together in 4 seasons with Anup, such a wonderful beginning of Friday Waters of season 5. Thank you so much, Anup. And thanks a lot, Sonia, for the discussion and also all the participants for interacting with Anup. Thank you so much, all of you. Please take care. Do stay tuned. Whenever we start the season 5 more sessions, we will come back to you with more information. For now, just sit back, relax. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mansee.
Thanks.
I'm also thankful to all of the participants who actually listened and for the time and
yes.
Wonderful work, by the way, huh? So, lot to talk. Chal. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.